Ever walked into a room where everything screams, "You belong here," where the polished surfaces and the promise of service suggest respect, yet every subtle signal tells you you don't? It's a feeling many of us, especially black folks, know too well. A quiet dismissal that cuts deeper than any shout. Today we're diving into the powerful story of Sarah Jenkins, a young black woman whose unwavering integrity put her directly in the crosshairs of prejudice, only for it to become the catalyst for her greatest triumph. This isn't just a story about a diner. It's about dignity, resilience, and the moment one individual decided she wouldn't let injustice stand. Stick around, because this ride is full of twists you won't see coming, and lessons that will resonate long after the last coffee cup is filled. Ever feel like you're trying your best, doing everything right, but the world keeps showing you its ugly side? Like there's an unspoken rule, an invisible barrier that decides who gets respect and who gets dismissed. That was the daily reality for Sarah Jenkins at the Lakeside Diner in Willow Creek, California. For almost 3 years, the Lakeside had been her second home. It wasn't some fancy bistro, just a local spot tucked between a hardware store and a laundromat. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee, where families came for Sunday breakfast, and where the waitstaff should have learned your order before they learned your name. Sarah loved the rhythm of it, the constant motion. She believed in showing up, doing her job, and treating people with kindness. That was how she'd been raised, simple principles. Work hard, respect others, and keep your head down when things got messy. But sometimes, doing the right thing had consequences, and the Lakeside was a masterclass in subtle consequences. The hours were long. The pay barely kept her afloat in a one-bedroom apartment with rent always feeling too high. And her younger sister Maya was in her second year of college. Maya didn't know Sarah was secretly helping cover her textbooks and groceries when their mom couldn't. Sarah never told her, just sent a little extra when she could. That was why Sarah took the double shifts, why she put up with customers who barely looked her in the eye, and why she put up with coworkers who acted like kindness was a weakness. Sarah had seen things at the Lakeside that made her stomach churn. The way Brenda, a senior waitress with a perpetual smirk, treated some customers like they didn't exist while she laughed and flirted with others. Or how Gary, a newer server, would conveniently avoid certain tables altogether. The whole energy of the restaurant shifted, depending on who walked through the doors. It wasn't just about money, though. Tips were king. A well-dressed white businessman would get smiles and engaging conversation. A working-class customer, perhaps a black man in a paint-stained uniform, got rushed service, or worse, outright ignored. If someone looked like they might not tip well, some of the staff wouldn't even try. Sarah hated it. It was a constant low-grade hum of unfairness that simmered beneath the surface of every shift. But calling it out wasn't an option. She'd learned that the hard way a few months back. She'd made a comment, just a casual remark, about how a table had been waiting too long while Brenda lingered by the counter, scrolling through her phone. Brenda had looked her dead in the eye and said, "You don't get paid extra for being a Saint, Sarah." That was the rule. Either you went along with it, or you learned to keep your mouth shut. Sarah had chosen the latter, her integrity, battling her need to survive. Integrity isn't always convenient, is it? Sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone even when the system wants you to stay silent. Sarah understood that for many, especially people of color, walking into a place like the Lakeside meant preparing for this invisible barrier, this unspoken judgment. She hated being part of it, even passively. But sometimes all it takes is one moment, one person to challenge everything. And after that night, nothing at the Lakeside Diner would ever be the same again. The pressure was building, and Sarah was about to be pushed to her breaking point, forcing her to confront the very unfairness she'd been trying to ignore. The stage was set for a truly unexpected test of character. The day started like any other, a familiar rhythm of orders and refills. But one customer changed everything. He walked in unnoticed, a seemingly ordinary man, but he carried a secret that would shake the very foundations of the diner. The dinner rush had come and gone. It was a slow Wednesday evening, the kind Sarah actually didn't mind. Fewer customers meant fewer complaints, fewer spills, and fewer fake smiles from her coworkers, who only turned on the charm when it suited them. She was at the counter, refilling the sugar dispensers, her mind drifting to Maya's latest textbook bill when the bell above the door jingled. An older black man walked in. His clothes were clean but slightly worn, nothing flashy. Just a simple button-up and slacks. He carried himself with quiet confidence, but there was something in his posture, in the way he took a brief second to scan the room before stepping forward. Sarah recognized that hesitation. She had seen it before, especially in customers who already knew what kind of welcome they were or weren't about to get. They'd learned to brace for it. And sure enough, the response was immediate. Brenda, leaning against the counter, didn't even look up from her phone. Gary, who had been joking with another server near the drink station, glanced toward the door, made eye contact with the man for a split second, and then went right back to his conversation. No greeting. No, "Welcome to the Lakeside Diner." Just silence. Have you ever been that person standing in a room full of people and felt completely invisible? Like you were an inconvenience, not a customer. Like your presence itself was a burden. That's the weight of it. Thick and uncomfortable, that settled over the diner. This wasn't an accident. Her coworkers had made a choice. For a second, Sarah considered keeping her head down, staying out of it. It would be easier. It always was. Her job, her sister's tuition, everything hinged on her not making waves. But then she glanced at the man again. The way he stood there waiting, like he was giving them a chance to prove him wrong just this once. Like he carried the quiet dignity of 1,000 overlooked moments, and tonight he was offering one last opportunity for decency. So Sarah made a choice too. She wiped her hands on a napkin, grabbed a menu, and walked straight over. "Evening, sir," she said, her voice warm but casual. "Just you tonight." The man met her eyes, and something in his expression softened, a subtle shift from guarded expectation to a flicker of genuine surprise. "Yes, ma'am?" he said, his voice steady. Sarah smiled and gestured toward an open booth near the window. "Follow me. You okay with the booth?" "Perfectly fine," he said as he settled in. She handed him a menu and pulled a pen from behind her ear. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Coffee," he said. "Black." "Coming right up." Sarah moved quickly, grabbing a fresh pot and pouring his cup herself. She could feel Brenda's eyes on her, feel Gary watching too. But she didn't turn around. As she set the coffee down in front of him, he glanced around the restaurant, then back at her. "You the only one working tonight?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Sarah knew exactly what he meant. She flicked her gaze toward Brenda and Gary, where both of them were now whispering, barely even trying to hide their smirks. "Feels like it sometimes," she said, a dry chuckle escaping her. That made him chuckle too. He flipped open the menu and scanned the options. "What's good here?" Sarah tilted her head, thinking. "Depends on what you're in the mood for. If you're looking for something solid, the pot roast is made fresh. But if you want my personal favorite, the grilled salmon's the way to go." He raised an eyebrow. "That's so." She nodded. "Promise you won't regret it." He smiled, small but genuine. "Salmon it is." Sarah jotted it down. "Great choice." As she walked back to the kitchen, she heard Brenda mutter just loud enough to be heard, "She's wasting her time." Sarah clenched her jaw but kept walking. By the time she placed the order and returned with a fresh coffee refill, she could feel the shift in the air. It was subtle, but it was there. The way Brenda's eyes narrowed. The way Gary kept glancing toward the booth like he was waiting for Sarah to slip up or say something she shouldn't. Even Tom, the manager, had peeked out from his office, scanning the room before disappearing again. True character reveals itself not when it's easy, but when it's inconvenient. A single act of kindness can shine a light on deep-seated darkness. Sarah had the sinking feeling that she had just put a target on her back. But she wouldn't know how bad it was until the next morning. The test of character was over. The consequences, however, were just beginning. They say no good deed goes unpunished, and for Sarah it felt devastatingly true. She thought she was doing her job, embodying the diner's unspoken promise of hospitality. Instead, her kindness became her curse. Sarah had barely slept. Something about the way Brenda had muttered under her breath, the way Gary had smirked, and the way Tom, the manager, had peeked out of his office. It all gave her a bad feeling. She told herself she was overthinking. She had done nothing wrong. If anything, she had done exactly what a waitress was supposed to do, serve customers with respect. So why did her stomach twist as she pulled into the lakeside diner parking lot the next morning? The air was crisp, the sun barely peeking over the buildings. She grabbed her apron from the passenger seat and slung it over her shoulder. A couple of cars were already in the lot, including Tom's. Sarah stepped inside, expecting the usual morning chaos, Brenda and Gary standing around, chatting, the kitchen crew prepping for the morning shift, the radio humming low in the background. But something was off. Brenda wasn't leaning against the counter like she usually did. Gary wasn't making coffee or cracking jokes with the line cooks. Instead, both of them were watching her. Brenda had a sly little smile. Gary had his arms crossed, and neither of them said a word. Sarah's grip tightened on her apron. Then came the sound of a door creaking open. Tom! He stood in the doorway of his office, looking at her like he had been waiting for her to walk through that door. "Sarah," he said flatly, "come with me." A cold pit settled in her stomach. Have you ever felt that icy dread, that moment when you know without a single word being spoken that your world is about to shift drastically and unfairly? It's a feeling many of us, especially those from marginalized communities, know intimately. The quiet hum of injustice before the hammer falls. Tom didn't answer, just turned and walked back into his office. Sarah swallowed hard. She could feel Brenda and Gary still watching her as she made her way to the back. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped inside. The office was cramped, the desk covered in paperwork and old coffee stains. A file sat open in front of Tom, but he wasn't looking at it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, let out a slow breath, and said, "We're letting you go." The words hit like a slap. Sarah blinked, her mind scrambling to make sense of what she had just heard. What? Tom's expression didn't change. "It's not working out." Her heart pounded. Not working out. She let out a sharp laugh, one that had no humor in it. "I've been here almost 3 years. I've never missed a shift, never been late." Tom exhaled through his nose like he was already tired of the conversation. "It's a decision we've made. Sarah knew what that meant. Her throat tightened. "This is because of last night, isn't it?" Tom didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. His silence was enough. Sarah felt heat rise to her face. "So I get fired for doing my job." Tom's fingers tapped against the desk. "You can collect your final paycheck next week." That was it. No warning. No explanation. Just out. Sarah clenched her fists, but she knew there was no point in arguing. She untied her apron and set it on the chair. As she turned to leave, she hesitated at the door, forcing herself to look back at Tom. "You know this isn't right," she said, her voice steady, surprisingly firm. Tom didn't even flinch. Sarah shook her head and walked out. Brenda was still standing near the counter when she stepped back into the main dining area, a knowing smirk on her face. Gary was pretending to wipe down a table, but he wasn't even trying to hide the look of satisfaction in his eyes. They had been waiting for this moment. Sarah felt her face burn, not with embarrassment, but with a fierce, quiet anger. She wanted to say something, wanted to call them out, make a scene, demand to know how they could be so damn heartless. But she didn't. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She lifted her chin, walked past them without a word, and pushed through the doors into the cold morning air. For the first time in 3 years, she had no job, no paycheck, no backup plan. She got into her car, slammed the door shut, and gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. How was she going to pay rent? How was she going to help Maya with her groceries, her tuition? The weight of it all pressed down on her. Doing the right thing sometimes leads to immediate pain. But character, unlike convenience, has a way of paying dividends you can't foresee. Her phone buzzed. Sarah ignored it at first, staring blankly at the windshield, her thoughts spiraling. Then she glanced at the screen. Unknown number. She hesitated, then with a shaking hand she answered, "Hello." A deep voice came through the line, steady and familiar. "Sarah, this is Richard Lawson." Her breath caught. She sat up a little straighter. "I'm sorry, who?" "The man you served last night at the lakeside diner." Her stomach twisted. Of course he had. News traveled fast in places like the lakeside. "Oh, yes, sir. How can I help you?" There was a pause. Then Richard said, "I heard what happened." Sarah's stomach twisted. "Yeah, well," she said, forcing out a bitter laugh. "Guess I should have just ignored you like everyone else." Richard's next words made her freeze. "That's exactly why I'm calling. Because this wasn't the end of Sarah's story. It was just the beginning." The stage was set for a twist that would redefine everything. Just when Sarah felt utterly lost, when the world seemed determined to punish her for her decency, the voice on the phone delivered a revelation that would shatter everything she thought she knew. This wasn't just a customer. This was the king returning to his fractured kingdom. Sarah's grip on the phone tightened. Her heart pounded as she sat up straighter in the driver's seat. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" She managed her voice barely a whisper. There was a pause on the other end. Then Richard's voice came through steady and deliberate, cutting through her disbelief like a perfectly aimed blade. "I wasn't just there for dinner last night, Sarah," he said. "I was there to see how my employees treat people." Sarah blinked. "Your employees?" "I own the Lakeside Diner," Richard said simply. For a moment, the words didn't even register. She sat frozen, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and shock. He owned it. The man, Brenda, and Gary ignored the man. Tom had tacitly allowed to be disrespected was the owner. "I'm sorry, what?" she finally managed. "You heard me," he said. Sarah pressed her fingers to her temple. "So you're telling me you own this place, and last night you were, what, checking in?" "More or less," Richard said. "I make it a habit to visit my restaurants unannounced. No formal inspections, no warning. I come in as just another customer. That's how you learn the truth about how a business is being run." Sarah's chest felt tight. All the slights, all the prejudiced treatment she'd witnessed, all the times she'd swallowed her frustration. He had seen it. He had seen her. "And what did you learn?" she asked, a raw edge to her voice. Richard sighed. "That I have a serious problem with my staff." Sarah let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, no kidding." There was another pause. Then Richard asked, "How long have you worked there?" "Almost 3 years," she said. 3 years, and I've never missed a shift, never been late. I keep my head down, do my job, and treat people like human beings." Frustration crept into her voice. "But apparently, that was enough to get me fired." "That's exactly why I'm calling," Richard said. Sarah furrowed her brows. "I don't understand." Richard was quiet for a moment before he spoke again, and his next words were the real shockwave. "I let them fire you on purpose." Sarah's stomach dropped. "You? What?" "I needed to see what they would do," Richard explained. "I wanted to know if this was just about bad service or if it was something deeper. And now I have my answer." He understood the subtle racism, the classism, the complete lack of empathy. He'd seen the way Brenda's smirk and Gary's dismissiveness spoke volumes, the way Tom's silence condoned it all. This wasn't just a simple personnel issue. It was a systemic rot, and Sarah had been the unexpected litmus test. Sarah shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "So you let them throw me out just to prove a point?" "I know it wasn't fair," Richard admitted, his voice softening slightly. "But now I know exactly who I can't trust to run my business the way it should be run." Sarah felt her pulse thumping in her ears. "And what does that mean for me?" There was a shift in Richard's tone, something firm, almost authoritative. "It means I need someone I can trust," he said. "I need someone who actually understands what it means to run a restaurant fairly. Someone who doesn't pick and choose, who gets treated with dignity based on their own prejudices." Sarah frowned. "I still don't see what this has to do with me." Richard's next words stopped her cold. "I want you to come back," he said, "as the new manager." Sarah's breath caught. Her brain scrambled to process what she had just heard. What?" "You heard me," Richard said. "I fired your manager this morning. Tom's done." Sarah's mouth fell open. Brenda and Gary were going to lose their minds. "I know this is sudden, but I'm not interested in anyone else taking over," Richard continued. "You understand what matters in a workplace. You know how people should be treated. That's exactly what the Lakeside Diner needs." Sarah swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can do this." Less than 24 hours ago, she had been tossed aside like she didn't matter. And now, she was being offered the very position of the man who had fired her. "Yes, you can," Richard said firmly. "And you should." She stared out the windshield, her mind spinning. She could still hear Brenda's mocking voice, Gary's smug silence, Tom's dismissive tone. They had counted her out, thought they had gotten rid of her for good. But now, she had a chance to be the change they never saw coming. Sometimes the biggest twists come from the quietest observers. And true justice isn't just about punishment, but about putting power in the hands of those who truly deserve it. Sarah lifted her chin, gripping the phone a little tighter. "I'll do it," she said. Richard let out a satisfied breath. "Good. Come in tomorrow morning. You start at 8. Sarah nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I'll be there." As she hung up, she sat in stunned silence for a moment, gripping the wheel as the reality of it all sank in. Less than a day ago, she had walked out of the Lakeside Diner with nothing. Tomorrow, she would be walking back in as the boss, and she wasn't coming to play nice. The grand unmasking was complete. The new reign was about to begin. The sun rose on a new day, but for the Lakeside Diner, it was a new dawn. Sarah Jenkins walked back in, not as the dismissed, but as the decision-maker. And she wasn't coming to play nice. She was coming to lead with integrity. Sarah stood outside the Lakeside Diner, gripping the strap of her bag. The morning air was sharp, the kind that cut right through your clothes, but she barely felt it. She had spent all night thinking about this moment. Yesterday, she had walked out of this building with nothing. No job, no explanation, no respect. Today she was stepping back in with the one thing Brenda, Gary, and Tom had never imagined she would have: power. She inhaled deeply, squared her shoulders, and pushed open the door. The scent of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air, just like it always had. Customers were scattered across the booths, forks clinking against plates, the low hum of conversation blending with the radio playing in the background. At first, nobody noticed her. Then Brenda turned from the counter, saw her, and froze. Gary, who had been laughing with a busboy, caught sight of her too, his mouth snapping shut mid-sentence. A flicker of something, confusion, unease, crossed his face. It was almost too perfect. Sarah let the moment stretch just long enough for them to squirm before walking toward the counter, setting her bag down with purpose. Brenda recovered first. She scoffed, crossing her arms. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sarah tilted her head, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "You'll find out soon enough." Before Brenda could say anything else, a door opened at the back of the restaurant. Tom stepped out from his office, already looking irritated, flipping through a stack of papers. "Brenda, I need you to—" Then he saw her. His whole body went rigid. His eyes flicked to Brenda, then Gary, like he was trying to piece together what was happening. "Sarah," he said slowly, "you don't work here anymore." Sarah's smile grew, but there was no warmth in it. "Actually," she said, her voice clear and resonant, "I do." Tom blinked. "What?" Another voice cut in before she could answer. "I believe I can clarify that." Every head in the room turned. Mr. Elias Harrison, or as Sarah now knew him, Richard Lawson, walked in calm and collected as ever, his hands in the pockets of his tailored coat. He scanned the room, taking his time before landing on Tom. Brenda's face paled. Gary looked like he wished he could disappear. Tom opened his mouth, then closed it. Richard stopped beside Sarah and turned to face the staff. His voice was steady, measured, but carried undeniable authority. "As of this morning, the Lakeside Diner has undergone some management changes," he said. "Effective immediately, Tom, your position is terminated." Brenda gasped. Gary looked like he had been punched in the gut. Tom's face turned an ugly shade of red. "Wait a damn minute, no," Richard cut him off. "I've already heard enough from you." Tom's mouth snapped shut. Sarah almost felt bad. Almost. Richard turned toward the rest of the staff. Some of you may be wondering what's going on. Let me make it simple. Last night I visited this restaurant as a regular customer. He let the words sink in. And what I witnessed was unacceptable. Nobody dared to speak. Richard gestured toward Sarah. This woman was the only employee who treated me with respect. The only one who did her job the way it should be done. He turned back to the staff, his expression hardening. The rest of you. Some of you ignored me completely. Some of you made it clear you had no interest in serving certain customers at all. His voice sharpened. That ends today. The silence in the restaurant was thick. Then Richard turned back to Sarah. Sarah is your new manager. Brenda's mouth fell open. Gary's jaw clenched. The busboy standing near the kitchen looked like he wanted to clap. Sarah finally let herself smile. She turned toward Brenda and Gary, who were still stunned silent, and leaned against the counter. Well, she said lightly, this is awkward. Brenda's expression twisted. You. She turned to Richard, her voice sharp. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious, Richard said. You don't like it. You're free to leave. Brenda snapped her mouth shut, her nostrils flaring. She wasn't stupid. She knew walking out meant losing her paycheck, and Brenda wasn't about to do that. Gary, on the other hand, wasn't as smart. This is bullsh, Richard cut him off. You're welcome to quit as well. Gary froze. His mouth opened, then closed like he was doing the math in his head. Brenda glared daggers at Sarah, but Sarah just smiled back. Looks like we all have a lot of adjusting to do, Sarah said, her voice light but firm. So let's get to work. She watched as Brenda stormed toward the coffee machine, mumbling under her breath. Gary grabbed a rag and started wiping down a table, his movements stiff with anger. Richard gave Sarah a knowing look. I have a feeling you'll do just fine here. Sarah exhaled, watching as the restaurant settled into a new reality. One where she was in charge. And for the first time since she walked into this building 3 years ago, she felt something she hadn't before: respect. The next few weeks were interesting. Sarah had expected resistance. She welcomed it. Brenda barely spoke to her unless necessary, her usual smirks replaced with tight-lipped silence. Gary sulked through every shift, making it painfully obvious that he was only sticking around because he had no better options. A few other servers who had always played along with the old culture of favoritism gritted their teeth and adjusted. Some didn't. A couple of employees quit in the first week. They didn't bother giving notice, just stormed out when it became clear that the way things used to work, the unspoken rules about who deserved good service and who didn't, were over. Sarah didn't lose sleep over it. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to make things right. She spent her first days as manager watching, taking note of who was actually putting in the work, who was resistant to change, and who just needed a push in the right direction. And slowly things did start to change. The kitchen staff, who had always kept their heads down, began to speak up more, offering suggestions, pointing out when things were unfair. The younger servers, who had been following the lead of people like Brenda and Gary, started watching Sarah instead. One night, a busboy named Noah, a college kid who worked nights to pay for school, stopped her as she was wiping down the counter. "You really got rid of Tom for that?" he asked, his voice careful. Sarah looked up. "For what?" "For being a jackass to customers," Noah said. We all knew it happened, but I didn't think anyone actually cared." Sarah set the rag down and looked him in the eye. "I care." Noah hesitated, then nodded. "Good." And just like that, things started to shift. It wasn't immediate, but over time, the entire energy of the lakeside diner began to change. People noticed. Customers who had been ignored in the past started coming in more often, smiling when they saw Sarah behind the counter. Regulars who had never spoken much started to open up, chatting about their day, tipping more than they used to. Even the staff, those who had been skeptical at first, started following her lead. And then one afternoon, Richard Lawson walked in. Sarah was in the middle of balancing invoices when she heard his voice. "How's my investment doing?" She turned, pushing the paperwork aside, and smirked. "I think we're in good shape." Richard glanced around. The restaurant was busy, not just with customers, but with a different kind of energy than before. The staff moved with purpose, the atmosphere lighter, the tension that had once been there now gone. Richard nodded, satisfied. "Told you you'd be fine." Sarah leaned against the counter. "You didn't exactly give me a choice," Richard chuckled. "No, I didn't." Sarah exhaled, looking around the transformed space. "It's weird," she admitted. "For the longest time, this job was just a job, a paycheck. And now, it's something more." Richard's expression softened. "Funny how life works, huh?" Sarah thought back to that morning sitting in her car, feeling like she had lost everything. And yet, here she was. She wasn't just another waitress anymore, she was the boss. And she had made damn sure that the lakeside diner would never go back to the way it was. Because doing the right thing wasn't always easy. Sometimes it cost you everything. But sometimes, when you stand firm on your principles, when you fight for what's right, it gives you more than you ever imagined. It gives you a voice. It gives you purpose. It gives you a chance to rewrite the rules. The sun still gleamed on the facade of the lakeside diner. But for Sarah Jenkins, and for everyone who walked through its doors, nothing inside would ever be quite the same. This wasn't just about one woman's journey from dismissal to empowerment. It was about a systemic crack, exposed a quiet battle, fought and won against the subtle, insidious biases that exist in our everyday lives. Sarah's story echoes the experiences of countless Black individuals who navigate spaces designed to diminish their presence. It's a stark reminder that the fight for respect often happens not with grand gestures, but with quiet defiance, unwavering self-worth, and the courage to call out what's hidden in plain sight. So if Sarah's story resonates with you, if you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued simply because of who you are, especially as a Black person, striving in a world that isn't always fair, know this: your voice matters. Your experience matters. Don't let anyone make you invisible. Speak up. Trust your gut. Demand the respect you've earned not just for yourself, but for every single person who might walk through that door after you. Hit that like button if you've faced similar walls, subscribe to join our community, and share your own stories in the comments below. Let's keep these conversations going, because when we stand together, the invisible walls begin to crumble.